So that's auto layout updates. The third one, and probably the most complicated one, is the prototyping updates. So in a nutshell, what they've done is they've added logic to prototyping. So the two things you're really concerned with is the new interaction types, and those are set variable and conditional. So I made a little demo thing here, how we can make a counter. It's like the simplest way to show this. But essentially what you can do is if I take this button and I want to add an interaction to it, they've added these new, on click, they've added these new options for interactions on layers. So now not only do you have the classic, navigate to, change to, overlay stuff, they've added these. Some of these have been in here for a little bit already. I mentioned scroll to because it's relatively new. But the biggest new ones are set variable and conditional. So set variable is, let's say I want to set variable on click. I can actually change the value of any of the variables that I've defined in this file to whatever I want to define it to. So in this case, if I click on the plus button, let's say I want to make this a counter, I can set number variable to, so I can either set it to a specific value. So let's say I set it to 21, but that's not going to be very useful. If I want to make this a counter, it's only going to work once, right? So what you can do is you can use expressions. So what I can say is I can say, when I click on this button, I set variable number and I set it to that variable plus 1. Right? So I can use an expression as well as just custom values. And now if I'm to view this in prototype, and this is going to be a bit of a tangent, but you can now just press Shift space and you can view that prototype in a window in your workspace. You don't have to go to presentation view. So this is a pretty nice workflow addition they've added to Figma. But anyway, so now I have that interaction. Every time I click plus, it's going to infinitely keep adding ones to that string, to that number variable. And you can add multiple as well. So if I go back into this interaction, I can add a condition. So let's add a condition. So I can say if, so let's say I want to make, once it hits 50, I want it to reset for whatever reason. I can say if number equals 50, equal to 50, and I can add an action to set variable again, set number, and I can set it to 0. So now, in theory, if I use my counter here and I go to 50, it'll just go back to 0. And it can keep going. So in a nutshell, that's the logic they've added to prototyping. You can see how this is very broad in broad strokes. So you can apply this to a lot of different things in your prototyping as well. So you can make conditionals. In the demo, they showed a cart. So you can say, like, if this value is false, then go to this page. If it's true, go to this page. You can do stuff like that, which is really cool. But yeah, so that's conditionals in a nutshell. The other thing I just mentioned was scroll to. They added the ability to link to another component on the page, and you can scroll to it. And then you can add an offset if it's like scrolling to a weird position, which is pretty cool. Yeah. Any questions about the conditional stuff, or anything you'd like me to maybe go into more detail about? Because there's a lot to unpack there.
No, but it's really cool. I was just wondering if, for example, you present this same exercise to the client. Do you think they will be distracted by these kind of features? like spending more time playing with the buttons, or
Yeah, so
not really.
yeah, like we probably wouldn't go into this level for most things, but where this does help a lot is one of the flows I'm working on is the decision tree flow, right? So in the old Figma, if you wanted to actually represent that entire flow, we would have had to make like, I don't even know how many pages, probably like 20 to 50 pages just to show all the different states.
Mhm.
But if you now use variables and logic, you can actually make that flow with a handful, if not less, pages because of the way you can just change variables and change strings and stuff like that. So that's where it will help us a lot because we can now include a higher fidelity into our prototyping with the same, if not less, production time spent on it.
Oh, okay, I get it now. That's
Yeah, yeah.
great.
Simon, Zoe, any questions about just like if you can do certain things or anything? I didn't really show the full scope of this, so.
Yeah, I've like played around with this a little bit already. The
Cool.
one thing I'm curious, I'm kind of waiting a tiny bit. I'm very excited for like some of the really big, more robust like YouTube tutorials and stuff that are going to come out. I like some of the more involved flows, but I think that for certain things, like I'm imagining again, like a shopping cart example or like anything where you're going through like a more detailed flow, this will be like so helpful. Especially yeah, the conditional logic will save us a huge amount of time. But yeah, no real questions at the moment. I think I need to like get a little bit hands-on with it.
Yeah, stuff like the prototyping in particular, I think it's really going to go a long way in product projects. As far as like the web stuff we usually do, it's going to be a huge plus for any projects that have like logged in states, stuff like that. And I'm sure there's a number of other use cases that will lend itself well to when they appear. But those kind of ones off the top of my head, I know they will come in handy for it.
Yeah, honestly, the one thing I'm it's pretty minor, but just having variables for things like padding and stuff like that is going to be so huge because you just input the same thing over and over and over again to every single frame.
Yeah, exactly. And you can add that to width, you can add it to height, you can add it to border radius or corner radius, whatever.
Oh, corner radius too. My goodness.
Yeah, and then in auto layout, yeah, you can add it to the padding, you can add it to the vertical gap or horizontal spacing. So yeah, little detail, but it's going to go a very long way with keeping things consistent.
Yeah, definitely excited for the next sort of newer project that we're able to like kind of start from the beginning with all of this in mind. I feel like it's a little bit tricky to loop in midway or later on within a project. But
the one thing I really wish that they included in this variable thing was if you could add it to the motion values on animation.
True.
But, we've yet to get there. Hopefully that's the next step.
God, yeah, that's such a good point. Like even I was just doing like it was like no more than like 15 screens for like this onboarding flow for XC and having to like re-input the exact transition values like 8 times was and then you go through it and you're like I think I want like 50 milliseconds like slower, like slightly different easing, and it's like yeah, so repetitive. So it's a really good call out. I'm sure they'll bring it in, but people might not be using the prototyping and that fidelity quite as much as these other features.
I want to see if there's a plugin for that. I feel like there might be, but it would be a really nice addition because there's no sort of like style like feature set or anything with animation. So
yeah,
longing for that. But this is all very cool additions, to say the least.